Shalom. I'd like to first thank my colleagues at the Shiloh Policy Forum, Attorney Bentzi Lieberman, the chairman, and Dr. Anat Roth, the CEO, for putting this amazing conference together, and to Professor Moshe Koppel, the chairman of the Kohelet Policy Forum, and to Attorney Meir Rubin, the CEO. For the past 2 years, my colleagues and I have been working on a structure for Israeli-Palestinian relations that offers a new paradigm to the well-known, time-worn, and failed alternatives. Although we have not yet published the plan, we are encouraged by recent developments, which conform and in large measure complement our plan. By recent developments, I refer to the following. First, the Trump administration's focus on increased economic development instead of the continuing endless entanglement in issues that have no immediate solution. Two, the deepening of the formal entente between the Gulf states and Israel. Thirdly, the voices rising from the Palestinian public calling for more employment opportunities and economic growth. We are hoping to unveil our full plan in the coming weeks, but today I want to present a small yet important part of it in the context of this auspicious conference and in the context of the idea of a new Middle East. Announcing a new Middle East prematurely, as it was done some 25 years ago, is a fantasy. But not realizing a new Middle East when it's really happening is a tragedy. We believe that a new Middle East is finally emerging, but it will remain new and promising only if we act expeditiously. Otherwise, there are forces of evil that will bring us down. It is impossible to approach the new reality with a narrow and constricting vision. We need to get out of the shtetl mindset, set aside all the tired slogans. We need to think big. If you find it hard to imagine that the Jordan Valley can be an engine of economic growth, think for a second about the Tennessee Valley, where millions were lifted out of poverty through large-scale infrastructure and industrial development. True, different valleys, but it can help us create a vision and a plan. We propose an international industrial free trade zone be established in the Jordan Valley. It will stretch over an area of 42,000 dunam, 26,000 on the Israeli side, and 16,000 on the Jordanian side. In miles, this would mean 16,000 square miles. The area can accommodate employment for 250,000 people in 300 to 400 factories, offices, and logistical centers. Construction of the project will immediately require approximately 75,000 workers in fields such as construction and another 15,000 to 20,000 in ancillary services such as transportation, earthworks, and road construction. Because of its location, the zone will serve as the regional economic nerve center and logistics terminal for the existing small industrial zones in Jordan, for the joint Israeli-Palestinian industrial zones in Judea and Samaria, and for the Israeli-Jordanian project already underway in the northern Jordan Valley called the Jordan Gate Project. Why such a grandiose project, and why now? The result of simultaneous developments, there is a constellation of factors worth exploiting. First, as I already mentioned, the dramatic change brought about by the Trump administration when it comes to seeking peace with the Palestinians. No more wasteful emphasis on solving unsolvable problems. Rather than allow stagnation to rule the day, focus on economic prosperity and quality of life issues. The second development is the growing U.S. need to reduce the huge rate of U.S. imports from China in order to stop the suffocating dependence of the U.S. economy on the Chinese economy. We'll see in a moment how this seemingly unrelated issue is very much related. This was true before the corona crisis, and the need has now grown exponentially. And the third development is the abolition of the Arab boycott of Israel, with the agreements that have already been signed with the Gulf states, the Abraham Accords, and those yet to come. And now, enter Jordan into this historic constellation. Why? It's no secret that the stability of the Hashemite kingdom is in everyone's interest. The relentless violence in Iraq, the civil war in Syria, and the Iranian threat spreading instability throughout the region puts Jordan in a most precarious position. The anti-Iranian alliance and the economic access created following the Abraham Accords, under the semi-transparent sponsorship of Saudi Arabia, strengthens Jordan, Israeli interests, and American interests in the region with stable and united allies. The Trump administration also rightly wants Jordan to play an important role where the Palestinians are concerned. It is an open secret that the Palestinian population is much more interested in economic cooperation with Israel than is the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians, with unemployment rates in Judea and Samaria climbing above 18% prior to the corona crisis, and an 85% drop in PAA revenues, are in serious need of large-scale economic development. The economic situation in Jordan as a result of the crisis is also difficult. Unofficial estimates put the unemployment rate in Jordan at 30% and acute poverty at close to 20%. These figures do not include the hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, perhaps over 1 million, who have flooded the country in recent years following the Syrian civil war, debilitating the Jordanian economy even further. At the same time, Jordan is well suited for dramatic industrial expansion precisely in the areas of industry required to offset the American imports from China. Commercial coordination between Israel and Jordan as part of the Trump program may be a key component to the program's success. Both Israel and Jordan have free trade agreements with the U.S., allowing for competitive pricing vis-à-vis China. There is great potential for cooperation between Israel and Jordan as geopolitical conditions have matured. Jordan is ranked among the top 10 countries as an outsourcing destination and among the top 10 countries in launching startup companies. It has an educated and entrepreneurial sector that yearns for growth. Already about 25% of Jordanian exports are to the United States, and increasing exports exponentially is, of course, win-win. Israel brings to the table experience, stability, and a great deal of knowledge. Its innovative base has made it the startup nation and an economic powerhouse. All this is doubly true now that the Gulf states are interested in establishing close ties, economic ties with Israel, while also contributing to the Jordanian and Palestinian economies. This is clearly reflected not only in the intention of the agreements, but in the actual wording of the agreements. It appears that the best potential for joint development is in 4 areas of industry. These are examples, and they are by no means exclusive. First, pharmaceuticals. The corona crisis has exposed America's enormous dependence on China in the field of pharmaceuticals. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, China is the source of 95% of the ibuprofen, 91% of the hydrocortisone, 70% of the Tylenol, 45% of penicillin, 40% of heparin, 90% of vitamin C, and 80% of the antibiotics in the United States are sourced in China. Jordan has 17 drug companies that employ about 26,000 workers. Jordan is the only Arab country that exports more pharmaceutical products than it imports. 75% is exported to 60 countries. But at the present time, the pharmaceutical industry is in decline and constitutes only 5% of total exports, whereas in the past it was close to 8-9%. Exports to the U.S. currently stand at a paltry $45 million. Even a small chunk of the Chinese industry will increase those numbers significantly. Cooperation and the expansion of the pharmaceutical sectors of Israel and Jordan can turn this critical area of U.S. imports from China onto more reliable ground. Fabrics and textiles. The textile industry in Jordan is highly developed. It employs 25% of the Jordanian labor force and accounts for almost 35% of total exports. There are currently about 85 large textile factories in Jordan employing 77,000 people and another 20,000 working in small local companies. Jordan's textile exports total $2.1 billion, of which $1.5 billion goes to the United States. Textile imports from China to the United States, and this is by no means an intention of comparing Jordan to China. Nobody could compare it to China, but it is merely to demonstrate the market capability that can be capitalized on. Textile imports from China to the United States stand at $35 billion. In addition, the United States purchases another $27 billion in sports equipment and games and spends $19 billion on plastic products. For these three sectors, in which the total U.S. imports from China stand at $76 billion, there are efficient production lines in Jordan with a capable and yearning labor force. All that is needed is to expand the industries that already exist. Expanding the production of textiles, along with the establishment of new factories for the production of fabrics, which are currently imported to Jordan, the production of innovative and advanced plastics and sports equipment can increase natural production fourfold in a relatively short amount of time. Precision agriculture and processed fruits and vegetables. Processed fruits and vegetables are another area in industrial development that produces a win-win situation for all involved. The U.S. currently spends $1.2 billion per annum on imports of processed fruits and vegetables from China, $400 million on natural fruit drinks, 70% of the entire market in the United States, $222 million on fruit-based snacks, $167 million on spices, and $160 million on fresh vegetables. Total imports from Jordan in this area are a bare $12 million, $1 million on spices and $1 million on vegetables. Israel's knowledge of precision agriculture will dramatically advance the small agro-tech industry in Jordan. Growth of the agricultural processing industry will help small and medium-sized farms because it will significantly increase the demand for their products and increase employment opportunities even outside of the free zone itself. Raw materials and fertilizer production. Jordan is rich in many types of minerals, but phosphate and potash, used among other things to produce fertilizers, are Jordan's main mineral wealth and the country's second largest export. This is also an industry that could benefit from dramatic expansion, since the fourth largest supplier of fertilizers to the United States is China, which produces 5 million tons a year, 2.5 million going to the United States. Israel is the sixth largest supplier of potash in the world, and Jordan the seventh. The merging of Israeli technological advances with the Jordanian and Palestinian production capabilities for all the above, within the framework of existing free trade agreements with the United States, will be a winning combination. The location of the free trade and industrial zone. Transportation networks to the ports. A 4-lane highway will connect the zone to the Fatzael Junction and Highway number 5. From Fatzael, the Ariel Junction, the road will continue as a 2-lane highway with 4-lane travel resumed between Ariel and Highway number 6. At Highway 6, transportation will continue northward to Haifa until Highway 75 and southward to Ashdod on 6 until Highway 7. A rail line will be planned and implemented along this route as well. It will run from the free trade zone to the Qasim Junction, where it will link with existing and planned rail lines running to both the Haifa and Ashdod ports. On the Jordanian side, the zone will connect with the capital of Amman via Highway 65 and then Highway 40. The area north of Amman, where small qualified industrial zones already exist, will connect with the zone via Highway 30 and then Highway 65 to the south. The port of Aqaba for relevant goods will also be accessible through existing roadways. 2 bridges, one on the north end of the zone and one on the southern tip, will connect the Israeli and Jordanian sides, allowing for the consistent and easy flow of goods and personnel. The larger plan will include a land port in Samaria near the intersection of Highways 5 and 6. The port is intended to streamline port services in Haifa and Ashdod. It will significantly improve trade relations between the Israeli and Palestinian economies, and most importantly, it will deploy economic space for the Palestinians, opening a gateway for them to both the east through the free trade zone and, of course, to the west through Israel's Mediterranean ports. What I've described above must be complemented with infrastructure corridors that will service the industrial park and the free trade zone, as well as all peoples on both sides of the Jordan. What do I mean by an infrastructure corridor? An infrastructure corridor is a subterranean tunnel containing several types of infrastructure lines such as water, sewage, energy, gas, fuel, oil, electricity communications, and even fiber optics. These are also transportation corridors as they run parallel to highway and rail lines. The passage of national infrastructures through a single multi-system conduit has numerous advantages, which will be explained later in this conference by Dr. Shimon Farang, their architect. An economic space that seeks to generate growth and prosperity must be supported by an advanced infrastructure system complementing the needs of industrial production as well as the surrounding populations. The size and capacity of the free trade zone will require large-scale infrastructure planning in order to secure utility requirements such as power and water. Beyond the zone, Jordan itself suffers from a severe shortage of water, ranked fourth in the world for water scarcity. And its needs for natural gas extend well beyond its current supply. Jordan has a growing energy demand on the one hand, but a very limited domestic resource to fulfill this demand on the other. The local production of energy, including crude oil, natural gas, and renewable energy, covers a mere 5% of the country's energy consumption. The country's limited domestic resources make Jordan almost completely dependent on imported energy. This is a huge drain on the economy, comprising a full 17% of the country's GDP. In the past, one of the main sources of the imported energy was Egypt, from where Jordan imported natural gas. However, there have been acute problems with service disruption due to ISIS terror on the Sinai Peninsula, which has critically compromised Jordan's energy security situation. A direct, much shorter and dependable supply line from Israel's massive natural gas reservoir would be an effective alternative, allowing for resource diversification and security. Infrastructure corridors running from Israel's coast to Jordan's population and industrial concentrations would answer those critical needs as well of those all along the corridor routes, Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians. This plan proposes the construction of an infrastructure corridor from north to south with 4 routes from east to west for the passage of water from the Israeli desalination plants located along Israel's coast, as well as natural gas from the new reservoirs in Israel's territorial waters. The infrastructure corridors will help strengthen cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians and Jordan, leverage the development and economic growth of the region, and significantly improve the standard of living for everyone. If we allow the courage of our imagination a bit more space, we can imagine the free trade zone sitting on infrastructure corridors running all the way to the Gulf. Like the ancient Silk Road, bringing business and trade from the Far East to the West and back. In the new Middle East, unique peoples from unique places should be able to grow and prosper together. Only this time they will trade their goods on highways and high-speed rails. In conclusion, it can be argued that the project is too grandiose to be successful, but the exact opposite can also be argued. Precisely because it has a grand vision, it can succeed. We aren't in Tennessee, but neither is the river that Abraham crossed. The Jordan Valley Free Trade and Industrial Zone can be the first bridge over the troubled waters of the Middle East. Recent events in our region are comprehensive and dramatic. They require that we respond accordingly. The Gulf states think big. The United States does everything big. And Israel, though tiny in size, is poised at the intersection of 3 great continents with a big role to play for everyone's benefit. A real new Middle East will surely reflect that. Thank you.